My name is Wade Minter. I'm currently Vice President of Engineering at WeaveUp. I am also the ring announcer for Gouge Professional Wrestling. That's me on the left, not the right, in case anyone was confused. The guy on the right is the world's strongest mathlete, the geek with the physique, Seymour Snot. And then there's me, wearing my tuxedo t-shirt. I am also the public address announcer for the National Hockey League's Carolina Hurricanes, 2006 Stanley Cup champions, missing the playoffs for the last 7 years. And I'm not 100% positive on this, but I might actually be the only person at OSCON who has been on SportsCenter in the previous year.
It's our top. Take a listen to this.
I really just wanted an excuse to show this to people.
Carolina Hurricanes go! Scored by number 42, Wade Minter!
So I scored my own goal and then announced my own goal,
which
was fun for me.
Let's hear it again.
But that's actually not why I'm here at OSCON, even though I am feeding my ego by showing my hockey highlight, singular. Why I am actually here. I am Vice President of Engineering at WeaveUp, which is going to be the internet's #1 source for hair extensions and weaves. We're pretty excited by that. I'm a customer myself. No, totally making that up. WeaveUp is digitally printed fabric. So we're a textile startup that's allowing you to customize artwork, get it printed on fabrics. Before that, I was at Rackspace. I helped start TeamSnap. I was at a company called AdWorks for a while. My career progression has been from the computer science department at the College of William & Mary, to a sysadmin, to a Rails developer, to whatever the heck it is that I do now. I'm part of the Research Triangle, North Carolina startup scene. Pause for jokes about bathrooms and idiot governors. Cool. And by being part of that startup scene, I've seen a lot of stuff that I think could change in our industry. I've been hiring developers myself for about 10 years in various roles, and in fact, I'm hiring now. So if you want to work for a company that can joke about being a hair extension company, come see me after the thing. I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but developers are expensive if you're a hiring manager, if you're a company. It's good if you're a developer. It's good times. That computer science degree is coming in handy. I checked yesterday. The US average for a senior software developer on Glassdoor is about $120,000. To me, that seems a little bit low based on the Raleigh area. I'm sure it's probably even worse in the Bay Area. But I actually had a candidate come to me today that we were recruiting. She's like, yeah, I've got 2 offers already on the table, 123. You're going to have to meet that number or we're not talking. So I was like, budget. But recruiting is hard. How many people here, just so I can actually kind of calibrate this talk, because I could go a couple different directions on it. How many people here consider yourself a junior developer? Okay, there's a couple. How many people here do not and are kind of in the position of hiring or mentoring senior developers? How many people never answer questions that involve raising your hands? That's called a paradox. You just broke the universe. Nice job, pal. Always one in every crowd. Cool. So if you're a senior developer, if you're involved in hiring and recruiting is hard. I know for personal experiences, I've been trying to fill kind of a mid-level Rails position for a few months now. Developers out there who have any sort of chops whatsoever tend to have multiple offers available to them. They tend to be able to kind of take their pick of companies. You really do have to wow them. There's not that many available people at any given point in time. And if you have to go find people who aren't available, you're really going to have to give them something compelling to listen to, lest they move on past your offer in favor of someone else's. However, and this is especially true in the Triangle tech scene, I talk to people who are having trouble hiring developers. And they have job openings. This is from smaller startups all the way up to the IBMs and Ciscos of the world. And I talk to people and say, what, are you having trouble hiring? Yes, we're totally having trouble hiring. We can't find anybody. Our work's slowing down. Like, oh, well, have you checked her out? She's a very smart person. She's coming into development. Oh, no. We only hire senior developers. We don't hire junior developers. and as mentioned, where do you think senior developers come from? They come from junior developers who worked and got better and got smarter and then became senior developers. But there's this kind of mental block that I see in a lot of hiring managers, enough hiring managers that I think it's actually a thing and not just selection bias on my part, that makes me think that we need a different approach to how we find, train, and retain junior developers. Here's some of the most common arguments that I hear, and I'm going to kind of list off a few here. If at any point in time you have a question, you want to talk about something, just certainly raise your hand, shout it out, whatever. You know, this isn't television. I can see you. It's going to be okay, and we can talk about this. But common arguments that I hear from hiring managers about hiring junior developers. Common one is, we're too small. We're not big enough yet to be able to hire a junior developer. We're too small. We're not, and I hear, obviously this is the ones I hear from startups and not IBM. If I heard this from IBM, I'd wonder what was going on. And that's true up to a certain point. I would argue if you're a two-person technical co-founder type startup and you're trying to figure out, do you have a product? You're trying to figure out, is there a market for your product? This likely is accurate for you. You probably don't need to be hiring a junior developer. You probably need to just be hustling and getting that MVP out. If you're 3 people, maybe. But I think from talking to startups, that number where you're too small to consider hiring a junior developer is actually smaller than most people think it is. My kind of gut feel rule of thumb that is, if you're more than 4 people on your engineering team, you probably have the capacity to take on a junior developer. You'll have a few people up there kind of doing your architect level work, but you'll also have some capacity where you're probably not just hustling, trying to get an MVP out there. If you're 4 people in your engineering team, you've probably found a product. You may or may not have investment. You probably don't have revenue because it's 2016. But you probably have some way of keeping the lights on, and you're now going from to that kind of panic mode of, can I get my product out there, to how do I build and sustain this product? As a bonus, if you are still super small, you probably don't have unlimited funds to work with. You're probably in a seed round. You're probably kind of looking for that, you're in an angel round. You're probably looking for your Series A, and every dollar counts. So if every dollar counts, going back to the previous slide, can you drop 130, 140 large on your next developer? Probably not. That's where building and retaining a junior developer can come in handy. And we'll talk about some specific strategies that I've got around junior developers that I've used successfully in the past later, but I don't think we're too small applies above like 4 people or so. Another one I hear from hiring managers all the time is, yeah, they're too much work. We've got to watch them, we've got to teach them. Like we can't babysit anybody, which number 1's a little patronizing. But number 2 is not entirely accurate. Any new developer you bring into your company, I don't care how senior they are, is going to take time to onboard. This is not a junior developer phenomenon. I've brought in senior developers into companies, and they have to figure out, our particular idiosyncrasies in our code. They have to figure out, how the team operates. They have to figure out what the company's doing, what the product's doing. This isn't something that is just a junior developer problem. You have to babysit everyone who comes in. Different people are going to have different lead times, but don't try to make that into a junior developer problem. Everyone you bring into your company is going to have a ramp up. And think about it this way. If you have a junior developer and they're not super productive yet, they're kind of in their early days, take that time to use them as a sounding board for your problems. They don't know all of your history. They don't know kind of how things should be done. I don't know how many people have heard of the concept of explaining a problem to a stuffed animal and all of a sudden you get a blinding flash of insight. I've done that. How many people have actually explained their problems to an inanimate object? How many people have explained the problem to their dad who worked in a tractor store? Yeah, exactly. So it's the same difference. If you have someone who knows enough to be a junior developer, doesn't know enough to really kind of come in and start committing to code yet, you've got an opportunity there to use them as the sounding board for your problems. And quite often, in the midst of explaining this problem that you're having to someone who has no idea what's going on, either you're going to have that blinding flash of insight, or they're going to say, have you tried this? And you'll be like, yeah, no, right? I think we've all had that, and that's something that's a great fit for someone new coming into your organization. If you're hiring a junior developer, you're hopefully hiring people with smarts, with hustle, with the requisite amount of give a shit about your product, and you're hoping that the technology skills come later. If that's the case, then what you're kind of dismissing as babysitting for someone who doesn't know how to jump into your code base today and contribute is actually called training, and that's what we used to do before we kept jobs for 6 months at a time. People would train. There's time when you're not coding. No one can code that much without their brain breaking. There's times when you're just killing time on the Insta Snaps or Face Chats or whatever the kids do these days. I'm 40, I don't know. And you could use that time to refocus yourself by helping someone else get better. This one applies primarily when I talk to folks about code school graduates. Is there anyone here who is a code school graduate, just out of curiosity? Awesome, yeah, much love. I'm not, but I got a computer science degree and then proceeded not to use it for 10 years. So I would not kind of put myself up on any sort of pedestal. But there was a hiring manager that I used to know, and it was a really good company, open to remote work, growing fast, and I sent the hiring manager a really smart code school graduate who I liked. I'd loved the project that they'd worked on. I was like, you should consider hiring this person. And he's like, I don't hire code school graduates. Why don't you hire code school graduates? Well, they're not in it for the right reasons. They're just in it for the money. Looking at the salary survey, I would say a lot of us are in it for the money. This is not a code school graduate thing. But I get it. There's the stigma that's out there that code schools are just kind of suckering people in and giving them false promises and not actually training them up right. And I'm sure there's some bad ones out there. I'd skip that. In the interest of disclosure, I actually advise a code school in North Carolina, so some of this is colored by my perspectives. Happen to really like the Iron Yard. I know there's some other really good ones out there, but take that with a grain of salt if you think I'm pumping the tires of code schools for the wrong reasons. So I've seen a few. Some of them I like, some of them I'm not a huge fan of. But I guarantee you, nearly everybody who's signing up and taking Learn to be a Developer classes through the code school wants to get into it because they like technology. There are other ways to make money if you want to get in there. There are a few, I'm sure, who've been kind of suckered in by the promises, but pretty much exclusively the ones that I've seen really care. They've come from other careers, they've got ideas, they want to see the world in a better place. They think that if they get these skills, they can do that, they can get the ideas that are in their head out into the world, and by and large, they're right. If you're hiring junior developers, one of the biggest things you're hiring for is just that hustle and that drive to learn, to grow, to do. And if you've got someone dropping 10 grand on a 3-month immersive code school, they're obviously willing to put their money where their mouth is. The code school might not give them what they need, hopefully it does, but I don't think you can really kind of come out and question the desire. You can focus that desire, then that's the right reason. You've got someone who wants to build something. Let them build stuff. Teach them how to build stuff. So at my previous job to Weave Up, I hired 3 folks out of the Iron Yard. One of them had been an investment banker in his prior life. One of them was an English professor in her prior life, and one of them ran a retail store in her prior life. And all of them brought a really interesting perspective to that company, which was in the advertising industry. Boo, advertising, but still. It was in the advertising industry. We were targeting real estate agents. The person who ran her own small business, she knows what pain is like for kind of that independent person trying to get their name out. The person who was an English professor could really speak well to stuff. The guy who was an investment banker could really analyze data well, and they could all then pop in with those perspectives into our code and program and get those ideas out there. So I take kind of the developer who hasn't been a developer since they were 10, you know, she was at her dad's knee as he was a IBM programmer on a PC Junior, and just, you know, computers all through school, engineering all through college, and then writing into tech, you know, that's great. You know, there's certainly lots of those folks out there. But the person who had a perspective out in the real world that wasn't completely technology focused and then was able to translate that into working in code, I actually consider more valuable, because I really love the perspective that they bring to the problems that we're trying to solve. For me, in the companies that I've worked for, and the companies I've built, and the people I've hired, technology is not the end, it's simply the means. And the end is the problem we're trying to solve. And when people can focus on the problem we're trying to solve, use the technology to bring them there, that's great. I have very little patience in my company for kind of ivory tower discussions about which algorithm is better. I have a lot of care and worry about, are we actually helping people in solving problems? So that's a great perspective that you can get from someone who has not been immersed in tech their entire lives. A common thing I hear is, well, that's fine, but you know, the stuff we do is too complex for a junior developer to understand. We're working on stuff that's way too hard, and they're just not going to be able to get it, and it's not even worth us trying. We're going to go, you know, only doctoral students are the only people who we're going to hire. And some industries, that's absolutely true. And if you're working in those industries, you can completely disregard any of this stuff, because you may have to only hire doctoral students to do your work. That's the case, more power to you. But the vast majority of the stuff I see out on the internet this day and age is still kind of database crud. Yeah, it might tap into some things on a mobile device. Yeah, it might have a big data store. But at the end of the day, you're pulling stuff out of a database, you're putting it on a web page or a device, and then you're taking data in. And there are far more of that out there, I think, than pure doctoral research type applications that require advanced degrees. So really, if you're making this argument to me when I'm trying to send you a developer, be honest, like, are you really breaking new theoretical research grounds? Are you really doing quantum computing? Are you really doing, if you're doing VR, if you're doing machine learning, maybe that's fine, but really? I've seen your app. It's a database client. Please don't try to, give me your investor pitch and tell me that, you've revolutionized the art of hair extensions and weaves, when in reality, it's just a color changer, right? So too often I hear companies kind of pumping their own tires about how cool they are, when in reality, no, you're really not. I mean, I'm glad you're out there, I'm glad you're doing your work, but don't dismiss developers who can help you just because you've been reading your own press releases. In any of your companies, again, assuming that you're probably at that 4-ish person threshold or above, not all the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis is senior developer work. As mentioned before, those experienced developers who've been around the block several times, know things in and out, they're in high demand and short supply, and they're super expensive. Put them on the work that's at their level. That's a great use of your time and money. But I guarantee you there's stuff in your day-to-day blocking and tackling of growing your business, of building your platform, of running your technology that does not need a senior level developer at 180K to do. And if you're either neglecting that or putting that work on senior developers who are making 150 large plus and need to be doing the complex stuff, you're not helping your company. You may think that, we're doing great because we've got all these super experienced people and they're smart, but at the end of the day, someone's still got to fix the bugs. Someone's still got to update the text that marketing wants changed. Somebody's still got to fix that CSS problem, because there will be CSS problems. There's all of the stuff that goes on that is just, to some extent, the work that has to get done. And if you can have someone on your staff who that's interesting and a challenge for, give that to them. Then your senior folks can go off and do the stuff that's really going to innovate your business. Not all the work that you do, I guarantee you 100%, is senior developer work. It's not even mid-level developer work. Find someone who can do that work and grow in it. Then you won't tick off your experienced developers. You're going to make someone else really happy. So here's just kind of an example from our Jira board of stuff that we've got coming up next at WeaveUp. Hopefully I'm not revealing any deep, dark customer secrets here. But there's some interesting work on there. We've got something in our customizer tool down at the bottom where occasionally designs are derping out and going black. That's kind of weird. That's down in kind of a really scary part of our JavaScript code. We've got something in our cart. We've got a change to our search functionality. That's gonna be kind of weird. We've got a lot of variables that go into the search functionality. Like, oh, when someone signs in wrong, the error state's not coming through. Number 1437. That's a display issue. That's Angular getting some data back and not showing that data. Am I going to take my senior developer and ask them to do that? That would not be a good use of my time. Am I going to take my junior developer and put that on her so she can get into how the data model works with Angular, so she can go in and look at the API and, yes, fix this bug that's been annoying our support people for months? That's a great use of her time. If I didn't have her there, I'm going to have to take a high-paid, experienced developer and put them on something that they're going to resent. They'll do it. They'll fix it. But they could probably be doing something that's better for all of us during that time. Same thing with 1423. If I go to a user profile, I should see their public information that they've marked. As you can see, I've got my junior developer on that one. That's a little more complex. It's touching a few more areas. You might have to add some new stuff to it. Does it matter if that gets done today? No. Does it matter if it gets done next week? Probably not. Does it matter that it gets done? Yeah. But she's going to learn a lot from that. She's going to ask a lot of smart questions. If I put my senior level developer on there, he knows how to do it already. He's going to pop in, waste an hour, have to go through the code review process, time that he doesn't need to be spending. So that's literally just kind of a screenshot from our Jira board. Yours may look similar. You probably have a mix of complicated things, business critical things, and stuff that just has to get done. With the stuff that just has to get done, there's a ready-made type of person out there who's hungering for the opportunity to do that. You should hire them. So as I've hired junior developers and onboarded them kind of over the course of my career, there are a few things that I've found that tend to work really well. One is that you bring them in, you give them a gradual ramp up. Build that into your onboarding process. Don't expect them to be in there committing code day 2. Give them time to set up their environment. Give them time to check out the code. Give them time to get the code running. Give them a really small thing so they can get a quick win under their belt. They can do the code, they can check in the code, they can have it go through your code review process, they can get it committed, they can get deployed. Confidence boost for them right off the bat. Start building them up, sandbox them pretty tight at first. Don't make them boil the entire ocean of your application the first week. Give them little pieces and then gradually expand their worldview, and they'll tell you when they're ready. Give them that gradual ramp up. Give them very discrete, achievable tasks. Like vaguely defined features are not great for that junior developer. Something where it's like, here's something in this state, here's how you can reproduce it in this state, put it in this state, here's how you'll know that you have fixed it. Great task. Again, especially if it's kind of sandboxed into an area where they can look at one section of your code to start with. Give them time to make mistakes. You made mistakes when you were starting. I blew away the entire password file for NASA when I wrote a shell script in my first sysadmin job. That was fun. Yay, tapes. Give them time to make mistakes. Give them areas where if they don't get it right the first time, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Plan that in. Don't be surprised. Don't have the expectation that they're going to get their first project right the first time and it's got to ship this day. That's not going to help anybody. Reward them for initiative. If they see an area in your code that's neglected, if they see an area in your product that's neglected and they're like, I think I could go in there and make that better, Great, split off a branch, try it. That's awesome. No one else has paid attention to that. Maybe you can gain some ownership in that area. A lot of times they're looking at your code and your product through fresh eyes. They're going to see things that you haven't because you've been there so long, you have expectations for the way things should work. They don't. They see something that they want to do. If it's within their wheelhouse, give it to them. That's great. You want to reward that because then that's good later on going to be the type of person who's coming up with great new ideas for your product. And give them regular, good feedback about what they're doing. Blameless postmortems are a great thing. Blameless postmortems for new developers are crucial. They're going to make mistakes, as noted above. Point out where things could have gone better. Give them strategies for how to do it again. Send them back in. With those things, I've successfully onboarded several developers. It's worked out really well for them. They've all become real constructive members of the team. There's another area in junior developers that I think is neglected but super important. I'm not sure, looking around this room, if anyone knows this, but the ranks of kind of experienced technologists are kind of slanted a bit towards white dudes, like me. It hasn't been the best decade or for women and minorities in tech. And it's getting better, and I'm not here to address the causes of that. However, if your mandate is you need to hire a senior developer because that's what your company needs, you're likely going to be picking from a pool that's very heavily skewed towards people who look like me, except probably with hair. If you're hiring a junior developer, everyone's kind of starting on equal footing. If your engineering team doesn't really have much diversity, there's your chance to bring someone in. You're going to have to support them. You're going to have to make sure your culture is not hostile to them. But if you're picking between somebody who looks like me with no years of experience and a woman or a minority or someone from a culture or country that's different than the one you're in, and they've got no experience, a lot easier to justify making that call. I happen to believe very strongly that a diversity of experience, a diversity of thought, is critical for maintaining good companies. You may or may not agree. But at the junior developer level, there's your chance to kind of take a flyer on somebody who you might not have ordinarily considered. Like, well, yeah, she's got 6 years of experience in Ruby, but he's got 7, so they're about the same price. I'll take the one who's more experienced. Like, you can probably justify that decision. If you're hiring entry-level folks, hire someone who's interesting. Hire someone who's got a different perspective on the world than you do. Hire someone who's hungry. Hire someone who wants to prove themselves. Your company will be much better off down the road. So here's a concept of something that you can potentially take back to your own company that worked really well for me in a couple of different companies. It's a concept that I'm sure I didn't originate, but it was something that I brought into one of my previous companies, TeamSnap, which is the concept of a support engineer. This is where we tended to bring in brand new developers. So at TeamSnap, we were a customer-facing tool in the sports space, and we had a tech support team. Our tech support team was primarily our users. They were soccer moms and hockey dads and stuff like that. And so they were super into the product, but they couldn't get any, they were not technical. Developers were always, of course, being pulled in a bunch of different directions to add this new feature, add this new feature. And so the stuff that support kept hearing day after day after day never really got addressed because it was never the most important thing. So what we did was we'd hire a junior developer, and they would sit virtually, this was a remote company, but they would sit with support. And they would be supports that they were tasked to help support figure out, is this a technology problem? Is this a user problem? Is this a data problem? They were the first line of support for tech support. So support loved it because they actually had a developer who would listen to them for a change, which was great, and would listen to them all day, not just when they were forced to. And the developer would then go off and try to figure out, oh, this is a bug. This is a bug in our back end. This is a bug in our front end. And if they had the ability to do so, they would make a pull request to fix that. If they didn't, they would at least triage it, say, I think the problem is somewhere in here. Here are the symptoms. Escalate it up to a senior developer. And what happened was that support engineer got into all the dark, sticky, scary places in our code where no one went. Because that's where all the bugs were. They weren't the areas where people were paying attention to. And what we found was after about 9 months or so, they knew all the dirty secrets. They knew all the dark places. They knew the code inside and out because they were in there fixing bugs every single day. We kind of had to promote them up into the full-time development group because they were too good. They got too good to stay in that role. We had them participate in engineering meetings. We had them code their own fixes because they were responsible for writing the code to fix it. Then we would have them train their replacement. We'd bring in another brand new developer, have them kind of hang out for a month or so. Then the old support engineer would move into the product development team. New support engineer would be there for another 6 to 9 months. If your company has a support group, this is a really good way to solve a lot of problems. One is to bring new developers into your pipeline in a really sustainable way. The other is to make your tech support people happy. And you really should make your tech support people happy. They're out there working hard for you. They have to deal with the stuff that you don't. And after a couple of years, and this is a little bit looking down the road, you've got a bunch of people in your company who know everything there is to know about your code, about your customers, and about your product. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, what most of us want, except we're trying to hire them away from Uber, which probably will not work. So, that's something that you could take back to your company today if you've got a tech support group. If you're having trouble figuring out a way to onboard junior developers, bring this concept in. Give it a try for a while. I think you'll be really happy with it. We were. I've used it in a couple different places, and it's been super successful for us. So here are my closing thoughts before we open up for 5 minutes or so of Q&A. As mentioned, you don't get senior developers unless you have junior developers. Give them the opportunity. I know everyone wants everyone else to do the training and you'll just snap them up. But as we've seen in the market today, your odds of finding that person are pretty low because everyone else is thinking the same thing. If from just a strict budgetary standpoint, senior developers, pretty hard to find, super expensive. Junior developers, fairly easy to find, really cheap, orders of magnitude cheaper. You can't run your company with all junior developers, but if you've got that hire that's been sitting out there for a year that you haven't been able to fill, would you rather have someone, would you have rather a year ago hired a junior developer who's now going to be really smart, or had that position open for a year, waiting for that person to come along? If you grow the people inside your company, some of them will leave. It's human nature. It's 2016 and the internet. But a lot of them will stay, and they'll become your experts. They'll become your culture historians. They'll know all of the things. They've seen it as they've grown in your company. That's really valuable to have. You need a few of those people on your team. And plus, as a hiring manager, you may switch jobs. Now you know some really smart people, right, who are experienced developers because you brought them in and you trained them up. Now they're available for you to go poach for twice the price. So that's my spiel. Go hire junior developers. Trust them. Give them an opportunity, and you will be very happy down the road doing so. Questions from anyone? Again, this isn't TV. I can see you. Yes, in the back. Places for a recent graduate with no work experience at all. It's tough out there. I tell that to people who are graduating from the Iron Yard. If you've got products you can show people, things that you've built and conceived and kind of scoped and shipped, that's really handy. If you're coming out with a degree in the technology area, then a lot of companies have internships that are specifically kind of for college folks. If you're coming out with a degree in English, you'll probably have to hope that you talk to someone who's been at this talk and will take a chance on you. Other questions? Sir? I think of the folks that we've hired as junior developers, I'd say of the probably 10, one of them left the industry. So for my very limited sample set, 10%. But it really kind of depends. You may find people who want enough technology that they can go be a sales engineer because that's really their passion. And hopefully you uncover that in the interview process. And maybe that's not the worst thing for your company, to have someone do an internal transfer. If they're just looking for some experience so they can go become a product manager, hopefully you tease that out in your interviews. You're not going to hit 100% success, but it happens. Yes, sir, in the back. Well, you're talking about pretty large timescales from junior to senior, but junior developers who just aren't getting it, you can try coaching them, and if they're still not getting it, unfortunately, you probably have to sit down with them and tell them, like, this just isn't working. Because, within the confines of what you can reasonably expect a junior developer to do, they still got to deliver. This isn't the kind of thing where someone can kind of coast. If you're giving them achievable goals that they should be able to handle, if you're giving them support, if you're giving them good feedback and they're still not getting it, may not be the right choice for them. And that's kind of a conversation you'll probably have to have. Sir?
How have you, you said to hire people with hustle.
Yes.
How do you suss out if people have hustle?
Sure. Yeah, so for me, it's a lot of it is what do they do in their spare time? Are they working on interesting things in technology? Are they trying to figure stuff out? Can you see it in their GitHub? Can they show you some products? For me, in the interview process, it's like, have you gone to our, signed up for our product, used it, and come into the interview with ideas? Like, you may not know how to solve those ideas, but someone comes in and is like, yeah, I signed up for WeaveUp, and I saw that when you guys were recoloring this thing, something weird was happening, and is it this or whatever? Like, if they care enough about our product to sign up and come in with ideas, that's a sign that they probably are bought in enough that they could be an interesting employee. So if you've got a public-facing tool, a junior candidate who comes in is like, look, I don't have that much experience in your particular framework, but I was poking around your product and I've got interesting questions. Like, cool, that's to me a sign of hustle. That you're doing your homework on the product, that you're thinking like our customers are thinking, because that's what I want all my developers to do. I want them to be solving problems in that way. So those are a couple ways that you can look and see, is this person really committed to doing the job and improving themselves? Sir?
Do you typically move your interns into the junior role?
We've never had really interns at any of the companies that I've done. We tend to hire people straight in as kind of that support engineer type role or a junior developer. So from my own personal experience, can't really speak to that. The companies I've seen use interns, that tends to be the path from intern who's really probably not doing a ton of coding to junior developer who's kind of doing junior level stuff and then kind of on up the progression that way. Right there.
In relation, I guess, in some ways, to the question about hustle, what do you find in terms of loyalty from junior developers?
Sure.
Or hiring that way?
More than a lot of senior developers. Still not objectively super high because, we know the world we live in. We live in a world where developers are in high demand and everyone's getting a high, valuation that demands that they hire a bunch of developers to fulfill their product. And, junior developers got to take care of themselves and their family too. That said, people who you took a chance on and have supported are much more likely, I have found, to stick around than a hired gun that you recruited out of this company. They stick around for a year and they get recruited out of your company to someone else. I can't give you any raw numbers, but your junior developers will be more likely to take that hometown discount than mercenaries. Others? Thought I saw another question in the back.
Yeah, following up on the development question, what kind of time frame do you usually look over?
To see if someone's getting it or not. So what time frame would I use to see? Probably between 4 and 6 months. Depending if it's the kind of thing where it's kind of working but not, maybe a little bit longer. If it's the kind of thing, we hired a developer who for personal reasons did not work out, but they hadn't committed any code in like 8 weeks with a lot of excuses, and we ended up having to let them go. That was actually a more experienced developer, but probably within that range. Like anything shorter than a quarter is probably not fair. Anything longer than 6 months, you probably should know. Somewhere in there. Sir? Sure. Right. Yeah, I show them that, because normally with my senior engineers, they're always asking for more help. We've got more work to do than we've got people, which is true, I think, in a lot of companies. And so with the senior folks, the arguments that tend to work best, and I've been fairly lucky in that I tend to hire senior developers who are pretty empathetic. You won't now have to take care of all the dirty laundry stuff. You can work on the stuff you're interested in, and we can have someone who is kind of level appropriate to fix the little bugs, to do the little tweaks, to handle the customer interactions. That can take time off your plate. Plus, I found a lot of senior developers, even if they're not really peoples, do want to pass on their knowledge. They do want to kind of pass on the lessons that they've learned, and giving them that mentorship opportunity to some extent tends to be a pretty big draw for them. I believe we are out of time.
We have time for
One more question. Yes, in the back with my haircut.
So, building off of the hustle side of things, do you do structured interviews or do you do more of an ad hoc
I do more ad hoc stuff. I personally despise whiteboard coding with a fiery, fiery passion. I've never been a fan of the I've got the answer key, you don't neener style of interview. So most of my stuff is more conversational. We do have a kind of work-appropriate take-home coding kata that we do with our developers that's actually relevant to the stuff we do on a day-to-day basis and not reordering a list. So kind of the more interactive interview style coupled with either demonstrated GitHub stuff or an interesting approach to the code kata tends to be what works well for me. If anyone has any other questions, I'll be around till tomorrow. I'll be hanging out potentially outside if you want to talk about any of this stuff. See my hockey goal again. Otherwise, I am Wade Minter. I thank you for avoiding a Docker talk and coming to listen to me.